I think it's almost not just natural, it's inevitable. I wrote a book on Helen, and I wrote that book on Helen because my biography was one of someone who watched Hindi films regularly. So, having watched those films, I fell in love with this character called Helen who danced through the deep dreams of millions of Indian men, and I wanted to write about her. So, even when you're writing about someone else or you're choosing a topic that you're writing on, it's always because there's a referent in your life somewhere. So, naturally, with fiction, you're always told, write what you know about, write that best, and hey, what else but your life? So, that first, that old saw that that everyone uses, that the first novel is always autobiographical. Hey, here's a flash. You're writing dystopic, utopia, or fiction, or science fiction, or you're writing fable, or you're writing, I don't know, a popular guide to astrophysics. It's always about your autobiography. It's always about your life. It's always about who you are. Well, the first draft was a complete monster mess. I mean, see, the reason why I think I couldn't get it right all those times was because I started writing this book when I was 16, when I don't think I was even ready to write it. I don't think I had the emotional maturity or the depth to write it. But I felt so put upon having a mentally ill mother who was bipolar, and it was a kind of poor me kind of book. And as soon as I was writing it, I was embarrassed about it. So it comes to the point at which you discover that your world is richer than you imagined, that it was funnier than you imagined, though you had a mother who was also prone to suicide attempts on a regular basis. And when you begin to drop self-pity as a natural mode of address to the universe, suddenly you find that you're writing easily. So at the age of 40, by the way, it was at a Jaipur literary festival that I had come to Jaipur, and I was sitting at a table with Salman Rushdie and Suketu Mehta and David Godwin, and I was telling them stories about my family, and David said, I'll represent you if you ever write this as a novel. On the way back from Jaipur in the flight, I quite clearly remember saying, okay then, Jerry, to myself, this is it. Now someone's actually interested in that novel. Go back, settle down and write it. So I got home, I quit my job, I settled down, and for the next 5 years, every day I turned out 1,000 words of this thing, and then finally I cut it down again. So it took me about 5. Actually, that last draft was 5 solid years of 1,000 words a day, and then cutting it all down to, I think the original first draft was the size of 3 War and Pieces, like a big stack of pages. But it was easy, like large sections of it were self-indulgent and, sort of like happy meandering remarks on and aperçus and what that, scratch, and then you come down to what you want, and that's your novel. And suddenly I began to see, okay, this might be working. What I think is important in India is the family as a unit. Whether it's Hindi film or it's great novels, the Mahabharata is a story of 2 warring families, everything is surrounded around the family. So all our energy goes into maintaining this postcard, picture, perfect image of the family, and all the cracks must be papered over quickly. And so the son with the slight mental problem can be locked in a bedroom for 5 years. The daughter who's not quite right must be kind of like, just hidden, tucked away. We just don't seem to be able to acknowledge, look, it's not that far away. And mental illness is not something that just affects those who are meant to be ill. We all have moments of great irrationality, of great illogicality, and at times when, we strike out at people, we are just phenomenally, sort of off the wall sometimes. And that's a moment when you're mentally ill. So we could all recognize this. We could all recognize that I'm also a sufferer. I also have these moments. Life would become much easier, and we'd be able to say, hey, it's not that different from diabetes, is it? It's still it's a hormonal disorder, it's a chemical imbalance, it's neurons misfiring in the brain. How different is that from an insulin insufficiency in the pancreas, But yes, obviously diabetes doesn't produce such dramatic effects. Don't think I'd be able to write a book about my mother, the diabetic. But it is true that in India we have almost have a disgust for mental illness, and we would rather die than admit to being mentally ill. Or that a friend, and and now when I travel abroad, people with such casual confidence will say to you, I'm bipolar, but that's sort of, I get it. I mean, I've been there. And they're not saying it, and people around that table won't say, oh my goodness, are you bipolar? Oh, poor thing, are you bipolar? Just accept it as another possibility, another way of existence, and another way of encountering reality, which is what it is. And our multiple and varied encounters with reality is what makes humanity so fascinating. So it's like, I don't get it, I really don't get it, and I really hope that it will change, and I hope that in the Big Hoom, now it's in Marathi, it's going to be in Kannada, I hope it goes to many other languages, just so that people will be able to say, well, yeah, that happened to me too. Stories of any kind, stories told when you're sitting in the college canteen and you're talking about your mum, stories that you're watching on screen, stories that you're reading on your phone, any kind of stories help us to see the great variety of human experience, the great variety of ways in which people experience the world and understand it. And all those stories, the worst form of, porn, okay, let's say pornography, is also rich and varied in that sense, because it presents a range of human experience. If you're thinking about say how most young men in India begin to understand what a gay is, it's because there's generally one scene in one of the dirty books that they're reading. So that's where their first introduction to alternative sexuality comes, because no one else will talk to them about it. Certainly not their parents, certainly not their brothers. The elder brothers and elder cousins are all busy pretending to be totally heterosexual and say, hey, look at that girl, look at the look and all that sort of thing. So I'm saying, every way that we tell stories, that all those stories go out and they're memes, right? They're concepts that feed the world and change the world. And I always say, if you want kids to read, you have to tell them how dangerous books are, how frightening and terrifying they are, that the book will change you subtly and slowly, that it will work on your consciousness. And when you finish reading the book, you will never be the same person who started it. But it is true. You will not be. A book will slowly filter somewhere, a story will slowly filter somewhere into your subconscious and change who you are. And that's why we need stories.